Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webcast. Our webcast today is Quit Ghosting and Improve Your IT Health in 3 Easy Steps. It's kind of an interesting topic, and we're excited to talk about it with you guys today. In the room here with me, we have quite a group. We have Spencer Dunford, our Director of Sales, Eric Nymark, our Systems Engineer, Alan Marsh, our CTO, and Aaron Suzuki, SmartDeploy CEO and founder. My name is Heidi Decker, and I'm the Marketing Manager for SmartDeploy. Just a few quick housekeeping items. We'd like for this to be an interactive event today, so as you come up with questions throughout the event, please feel free to ask those via the chat or the Q&A. We'll answer some of them verbally as we go. We'll also have Alan responding to some of the questions as well in the Q&A. So please feel free to send those over throughout. We'll also do a brief Q&A session at the end and answer some questions verbally. We're also going to be doing a couple of poll questions. If you could respond to those, that helps us kind of guide the conversation and better understand the group that we have here with us today. We're also recording this event, so we'll send out a follow-up email tomorrow that contains a link to the recording and the slides if for some reason you need to step away and you can't be here for the whole 30 minutes. But we are going to push to keep it to 30 minutes and be respectful of your time. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to hand things over to Aaron Suzuki.
Thank you, Heidi, and thanks everyone for joining us and making time to attend this webcast this morning. We've got a lot of discussion points, and we're going to call on Eric Nymark to give us a lot of sort of the detailed insight on the landscape around Ghost and comparatively how it stacks up. And then we have Chris Wall, who is an IT professional who is a SmartDeploy customer, has volunteered kindly to share his experience and provide us a little bit of insight. And then we'll give you guys a few kind of tips and tricks and best practices to consider around deployment ahead of wrapping up. And as Heidi said, we'll try to answer questions as we go. We'll also take as much time as is reasonable at the end to answer questions. So the company's been around for a while, and we learned a number of things in the process of delivering services that led us to create this deployment product. And it's something that we understand very well, and it solves a fairly specific problem that we had a very intelligent approach to, and knew that we could make it a lot easier to do this otherwise very complicated job. And that's why we got into the software business. We continue to deliver services, and things are going very well there. But wanted to get into this game and share this product out with the public and private sector markets broadly to see if we could change the way that people are doing deployment, and so far people have responded very well, and we hope that you'll have the same experience. So I'll hand it over to Eric now, and we can just dive right into some of the specifics around Ghost and how it works and how it compares to SmartDeploy. Go ahead.
Great, yeah, thank you, Aaron. So like Aaron said, I'll be touching on some of the imaging pain points and Ghost-specific pain points that come about through both my personal history and past roles in other organizations, and from what we hear back from customers from time to time. So the first thing that I thought of when we started talking about this topic of what are some of the pain points of Ghost are the actual image creation process, and not just image creation in terms of capturing an image, but nuts to bolts building an image from a reference machine. The first kind of part of that process is to actually go find a physical machine, set it up, and then start building out your master installation. That master installation process can be a bit painful, especially depending on compliance and the organization that you're in. I mean, that could take a month, 2 months, and even longer to go through, install all the applications, get management buy-off. And that was the case for me in the past. you also have to document that entire process so that when you need to go rebuild it, you have everything there and available for you. So after you go through that entire process, however long it may take, and build out your one image, you're great, and you have one image for one specific hardware type. And then say, you know, a normal organization can have 5, 10, 20 different computer types. And instead of just building one reference machine, you actually have to go next, grab a new hardware type, and start the process all over again. Well, the second time, you don't necessarily need buy-off, and you don't have to go through the long, arduous process of building that out, but you do have to follow your documentation, which could also lead to, you know, errors. We're all human. Your one beautiful master image that you created for a specific hardware type may not match what you go through and create with the second hardware type. So there's a lot that can happen there. And also when you're creating hardware-specific images or hardware, an image based on a hardware type, with all the drivers baked into that image, you run into issues where updating those drivers is hard because not only do you have to just update a driver, you actually have to recapture the image with the updated drivers. And it's also kind of a restrictive process. So today you have images for all the machines in your library, but maybe Dell or Lenovo or whoever your OEM is comes out with a new machine. Excuse me. You have to wait to have that machine in hand before you can start building out your next reference machine, and that doesn't always fit timelines. Sometimes you need to roll those out as soon as you get them off the truck. So once you've gone through all this process and you do have those images, you're kind of locked into a proprietary format as well. Ghost, in particular, is a GHO file format, which has limited mutability. So you can make some file changes, but you're locked into that Ghost tool to do that. And the changes that you can make are very minimal. You could maybe move some files around in the folder structure of the image or add some new file or something like that. But you can't add updates or do anything offline to that image without actually making a live change and then recapturing. That also makes it a less flexible tool set because you cannot integrate into other standard management tool sets across the IT industry. Another part of the imaging process and a major consideration with Ghost is Sysprep. So before capturing your image, you actually need to run the Microsoft toolset to Sysprep an image. What I used to do, and what's pretty commonplace with Ghost in general, is to actually capture a non-Sysprepped image so that you have something that's ready to go, because Sysprep can be destructive by nature. It's going through and generalizing the machine and getting rid of all that specific information about a computer that would identify it so that all your deployed machines are different. Well, then you end up managing not just one image per hardware type, you manage 2 images per hardware type because you have a non-Sysprepped and a Sysprepped image. If you don't go down that road, Sysprep is, like I said, destructive, and now with Windows Vista 7 and forward, Sysprep can only be run a certain number of times because it's doing some licensing rearming, and after 3 times of that being run, the reference machine is no longer good, and you have to start back from scratch, going through and rebuilding your reference machine. So you can see where as you start adding all this complexity of having hardware-specific images and, 2 images, one for pre-Sysprep, one for post-Sysprep, or dealing with the complexities of Sysprep, that updating this over time can be a painful process. You have many different images to update, and based on the number of hardware devices, you could be spending months updating just images, and that's not a very good way to spend your time. This also leads to greater technical requirements from the IT staff, so you do have to put a process in place. That process has to be followed and the tool set that's there isn't necessarily the most easy to use, straightforward tool set as well. We'll go to the next slide here. The last thing that I'm going to talk about today is the actual driver management. So up to this point, I've been talking about hardware-dependent images, so one image per hardware device. And that's kind of the common way of doing things with Ghost. But there's also another way that or I guess a couple other ways that you can go about this. Deploy Anywhere is built in with Ghost now, and it's a part of their product where you can inject mass storage in network drivers for deployment. So theoretically, you could have a single image that could then go down to any hardware type, because those mass storage and network drivers would be swapped out. But that leaves you on your own for all of the peripheral device driver management, and finding those drivers and extracting them and finding a way to sequence that on top of your deployment is a time-consuming process, and it takes a lot of technical skill. Not only just finding out how you're going to script those maybe installs from the manufacturers, or how you're going to go about that, but also getting the drivers out of those packages can be a bit of a pain as well, because not all of them are meant to be extracted or meant to be changed. The other way of managing drivers that we see kind of often is baking the drivers into the image, and by that I mean taking drivers from multiple different models, putting that into one image, and then deploying that image and pointing plug and play, or installing those drivers so that plug and play can parse through them and hope that it actually chooses the right device driver for the machine that you're going to. In that scenario, you don't have any control over what's installed. It's just plug and play is going to select a driver based on a hardware ID, and you hope it's the right one. And we see this many times lead to issues that are apparent in something like a blue screen, and you notice it right away. But we also see it where maybe it's not so apparent, and some users having some problems with power management, maybe coming out of sleep, or something like that, where it's due to the wrong driver being used as part of deployment. So that's all that I had to discuss in terms of some of those pain points. I'm going to kick it back over to Heidi to introduce our guest speaker, and we'll let him go.
Great, thank you, Eric. So yeah, we want to introduce Chris Wall to you. He's an applications administrator for Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer, and they were previously using Ghost in their organization, and actually just switched over to SmartDeploy in March and have had some really great success with that. So I just want to hand things over to Chris to talk for a few minutes about some of the pain points that he was experiencing with his old tool, and some of the successes he's had after switching to SmartDeploy.
Thanks, Heidi, and thanks to the SmartDeploy team for having me join the session today. I have to agree, with their pain points, the many different images that have to be created with Ghost. I just started this applications administrator position, applications administrator position back in January, and so I had a big job and shoes to fill to learn Ghost and all the tricks that you had to do to get it to work with Windows 7. But as they said, the many different images here in this firm, we have about 260 seats, and across all of the HP computers that we usually have 4 different models in the firm at any certain point in time. And for each of those, as they mentioned, you may want to have that second image to, ahead of Sysprep, so that you can load all your programs that you need before running Sysprep. And we even had a third image on top of that. We'd run Sysprep and then capture the image before it reboot. And so per each machine type, we had 3 images to maintain. So it got to the point where it was, we had to have a lot of space to keep all these images for each of the machine types. And the biggest thing that we started noticing that we really didn't like was all the automated stuff that Ghost used to do, like with Ghostwalker, where it would give it a new unique identifier and join it to the domain as well as rename the computer all just before it would reboot. A lot of that we had to end up starting to do manually before we, finished with our annual computer refresh. But when I took over the position, I started doing the Ghost images and getting them all prepared, but I also at the same time, because I was told by my boss to take it under my wing and make it my own, so I started pursuing finding different software options. And in that, search, I found the Acronis SnapDeploy, which in my, little bit of time that I spent with it, it was, a little more time consuming and difficult to set up. Whereas when I came across SmartDeploy, in the matter of getting it, and once we had it purchased and whatnot, it was 30 minutes to 45 minutes to set up, and I had it up and running and had an image mostly created within like an hour or two. And from that one image, we can image everything because it's hardware non-dependent with SmartDeploy's platform packs that contain all the drivers needed for most business computers models out there. So it was really easy to use and great to get back to that automated functionality that we had of it joining the domain, giving it that new unique identifier, and changing the computer name to whatever we wanted to change it to. But other than that, it's been a great product to use. I'm glad we found it. Yeah, and that's my spill.
Thank you, Chris. That's very helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with everyone. I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Spencer now to talk about our solution and maybe some tips and tricks for your deployment project.
Sounds good. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks so much, Chris. I think that's a really nice segue, and Chris's story is one that seems to resonate pretty well with other customers that we talk to. Some customers are, obviously down on budgets and so forth, so there's a couple of things you can do with Ghost if that's what you like using that may help you be a little bit more efficient. One thing you guys consider is to try using a virtual machine as opposed to a physical one as your reference point. A lot of times that can reduce the complexity and help make things easier. It doesn't quite get you to this SmartDeploy way of hardware independence that Chris started talking about and I'll talk more to, but it can certainly help you head down that path and reduce some of the overhead and cost and complexity that people generally run into with needing to dedicate specific physical models to their imaging and deployment process. The other thing to consider is a lot of the pain points happen around device drivers, as you can see, and I'm sure you guys have felt. What we've noticed is that some manufacturers are better than others at dealing with device drivers and easing some of that pain. And everybody's got different reasons for choosing different OEMs, but I guess my 2 cents is, as you're evaluating your deployment process and how you guys like to image systems, take a look at how different vendors support drivers. Obviously, Dell does things differently than Lenovo, than HP, and so forth. But consider how each manufacturer will support you from a device driver perspective when you're planning and implementing your deployment strategy. So skipping over to SmartDeploy, out of the box, we eliminate a lot of the common pain points that Chris and other customers that we talk to end up dealing with. And what we realize is in talking to customers, having an efficient tool set really helps people focus and execute on the tasks that they need to accomplish. And it frees their time up to dedicate more cycles on the strategic projects that they haven't had a chance to get to, and a lot of the tedious, time-consuming deployment projects just get accomplished and you're on to the next thing. So this slide obviously illustrates a lot of the common pain points. Number one that we run into the most is this concept of hardware independence. With SmartDeploy, we have you use a virtual machine as a reference point right out of the box. And it helps you when we go ahead and capture that image. That process is also a little bit different than Ghost, where we can do that conversion right offline. And your image itself only contains information about the software that you like to deploy to your machines, and not at all about the hardware it happens to be landing on. Second to that, we have these downloadable pre-configured device driver packages. So as people on Eric and Alan's and the SmartDeploy team spend the time to, as part of the services of the product, download and pre-configure the device driver packages based on the major business class OEM machines. So every end device gets only and exactly the device drivers that it has to have. So you eliminate some of the issues like Eric was talking about of, this is a big driver repository and we're going to leave it up to Windows and hope plug and play figures it all out. We're kind of the opposite of that. We're more prescriptive, and we know based off of WMI and some other aspects built into the tool what drivers are required to be deployed to that target device. The third item here is we have a standard imaging file format. It comes from Microsoft. It's the Microsoft Windows Imaging File Format, or .wim as opposed to .dho. For those that don't know, that's how Microsoft has distributed everything from Vista forward. It's what all their latest and greatest tools are expecting to find, and many other common management products on the market today support the WIM file format. It's different than Ghost in that it's not a hard disk sector-based proprietary format. It's a single instance storage, so it supports deduplication and reduces file size quite a bit, and it's a file-based container, not a hard disk sector-based container. So again, this is another piece that helps us with our hardware independence. We're talking about images containing software and files that you like and not hardware that you support. Final thing to touch on here is we have a really great way of making it simple and easy to update images seamlessly over time. So we talked a bit about Sysprep. That's one restriction that we've eliminated. We run Sysprep at deployment time, so you don't need to worry about trashing your reference machine on an ongoing basis. We'll just take care of it for you. We also have a patented way of spitting out deltas against the WIM file format that makes it really simple and efficient to keep your images serviced and up to date efficiently from a storage and bandwidth perspective. A little while ago, we worked with Passmark Software as an independent testing firm to do a comparison study. What we learned is of the common products that we run into in this space, that SmartDeploy was the fastest and easiest to use solution. We've got a link to this full study on our website, but what we realized is that actual deployment time was faster, and it really enabled people to get back and work on other more strategic tasks. And the reason it's faster is generally because the best practices are built right in every step to SmartDeploy. It's easier to use, it's faster to set up. Like Chris said, he was going from not having any knowledge of the product to being fully executed in an hour or two, building out a clean image from scratch. So we have the fewest amount of dependencies and the most flexible product on the market that ends up being the fastest. The other thing to consider from this graph, this is total time for all deployment tasks for one computer. Well, obviously, as you start multiplying this out for different additional computers and additional computer models, the disparity between products can grow even greater. The SmartDeploy approach, like I said, is a pretty straightforward one. This is a simple architecture diagram to illustrate how we get things set up. Essentially, in the upper left, you can see your IT workstation. That's where you install SmartDeploy tools, the SmartDeploy tool set, and where you would build and maintain any of your deployment packages. From there, you can build out offline media and directly start applying that image to any device that you have in your environment, whether it's virtual or physical, desktop or server. We support all the different SKUs of Windows and Windows apps as well. The additional piece there is if you have infrastructure in place, you can leverage the power of that to make your deployment process even more robust. Even if it's just a file server where you want to store your images, or you want to do network-based boot or deployment, or that kind of thing, that's what the optional infrastructure is good for. Additionally, since we're just using WIM, our boot environment is a Windows PE-based environment. A lot of the other management products that you may have already purchased or familiar with or evaluating, this is a good segue to be able to use SmartDeploy for its power out of the box and then leverage some of the features and capabilities of the other tool sets that you might have in-house or be evaluating as well. So we've amassed a large network of SmartDeploy customers over time, and the common theme that we generally run into is saving time, reducing technical complexity, having a really flexible tool set that can fit into any diverse environment. I mean, the themes kind of repeat themselves across both large and small customers, where people have realized significant value and they've shaved hours of deployment time and reduced number of physical people and knowledge resources required to perform the deployment. And the best part is the product generally fits in all budgets and for projects of nearly any size. So winding this presentation down here today, we'd really love to work with you further and have you take the SmartDeploy challenge and evaluate the product. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Just sign up for the challenge, attend a demo. We'll walk you through how to get up and started and use the product. We have a weekly recurring demo if you want to try that out as well. We've actually got one tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But download the free trial. We've got a free, fully functioning trial that you can take and implement in your environment, just like Chris said. In an hour or two, you can go from not knowing anything to actually deploying real systems in your environment. We've got a special promotion right now as well, so ask our sales guys about it. We've got a trade-in program and promotion. So if you're a current Ghost customer and maybe can relate to some of these pain points that we've talked about and are open to trying something else, I know a lot of customers have invested in Ghost and have those licenses, but maybe you get involved with the support renewals and so forth. Ask us about the trade-in program. We have some competitive pricing and options for you. And with that in mind, you can turn the time back over to Heidi, and we'll take a look at the chat logs and see about any question and answer pieces that have come in.
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to open it up to Q&A for a few minutes. We have just a few minutes remaining here for the allotted time. We've had some questions come in throughout the presentation. Edward wants to know, how does SmartDeploy handle multicast?
Yeah, so that is, the question also referenced Ghost as being good at multicast, which it is. Multicast standards are pretty common for image deployment. When deploying to multiple machines, multicast will definitely reduce the amount of bandwidth that's being used by the network. There's also an idea of having a smart network to know what to do with multicast traffic so that that traffic doesn't flood your network as well. SmartDeploy can do multicast deployment as well, and that's handled through Windows Deployment Services integration. And that will deploy to however many machines you need, so you can increment to whatever level you want. One thing to mention about multicast is there's this idea that multicast can be or is needed when it really isn't. We see benefit of multicast on deployments of over 20 machines versus unicast on some benchmarking that's been done. And on the flip side of that, if you're not using multicasting, unicast is usually quicker in those situations.
Thank you, Eric. Dominic wants to know, are you able to deploy images via a USB jump drive as an offline option?
Yeah, so we support offline media and network media as well. The offline media options that you have are CDs and DVDs as well as USB keys. The USB key setup is super simple. We'll actually go through and partition that, make it active, and add all the necessary boot files so that you can get to our boot environment. And it's a plug-in, walk through one wizard, and you're done type of thing. And another thing to mention with the DVDs and CDs is that we can also split the image and span that across multiple read-only media if you're in that situation where it's required.
Thank you, Eric. Michael wants to know, does SmartDeploy work on a VMware environment?
Yeah, so we can support all physical and virtual environments as well. So you can use VMware as your reference point to create your image library. You can also deploy back to VMware virtual machines or Microsoft or others as well.
Thanks, Spencer. We have a couple questions about pricing and license licensing. So how is SmartDeploy licensed, and do you offer special pricing for nonprofit schools?
For sure. So we have special pricing for nonprofit and education. SmartDeploy is licensed on a per machine basis, and it's a perpetual license. So you buy licenses for the total number of computers in your environment that you want to use SmartDeploy for. The product includes support for an additional year at 3 different support levels, and you can renew the maintenance on an annual basis as well. So it's really flexible. It's tiered. The more you buy, the more you save, so the cost per unit goes down as you get into larger environments.
Thanks, Spencer. We have a question about the platform packs. Has there been an instance that there was a system that a driver package was not available for, and how did we handle that?
Yeah, so there's actually a couple questions up here I see that I'll just kind of batch answer real quick. So in regards to the platform packs are created in-house by our support team. We create those platform packs for the standard business class devices. So your Lenovo's, Dell's, HP's, you know, the brands and the computer models that most corporations will actually buy. We have a good list of those machines currently today. If there's something up there if there's something in your environment that we don't have up on the website, that platform pack can be requested and we can build it. Also, platform pack updates, we update platform packs as well, and we try to stay in touch with what the OEMs themselves are doing, because we're using the drivers directly from the OEM. We're trying to update on the same rev frequency that they are as well. But if you ever see anything that's out of date, you can contact our support team and we can update that as well. There is another question regarding if SmartDeploy works on 32 and 64-bit machines. And yes, so the same process is used for each operating system, Windows XP forward, both desktop and server SKUs of Windows. 32-bit, 64-bit, same process. You start by creating the virtual reference machine, capture and deploy, all the same steps. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on was there was a comment about Sysprep, and I mentioned Sysprep being destructive to machines, and that in Windows Vista and 7 it won't run after 3 goes. And somebody mentioned in the chat that you can use the no rearm, or set the rearm value to false so that Sysprep doesn't go through that process. And yeah, that's true. That's something that you have the ability to control. And then Sysprep would run past that initial 3 times. But running Sysprep on your reference machine after you've spent so much time building and making this great image kind of destroys it in general, because it is actually going through and resetting multiple settings, changing a lot of different information about the machine itself, so that when you go back to that machine and you update it somewhere down the road, there's some tweaks that you still have to make to revert what Sysprep may have changed.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I want to just chime in with one other thing regarding platform packs. In addition to what Eric was saying earlier, not only can you manually modify any pre-configured platform packs, but you can create your own from scratch. We try to provide as much as we can, but again, where we start getting into a lot of people interested in IT consumerization, and I want to support, every imaginable device. As an IT person, you can take that on, and for the non-business class devices or non-white boxes, if you will, that might not have standard or uniform hardware components in each device, you can certainly create and customize your own in an unlimited fashion.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay, we're about 5 minutes over, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. There's a bunch of questions that we weren't able to get to, but we're definitely available to talk if you have questions that you didn't quite send in, or questions that you come up with later. We will get in touch with you if you ask some questions and we didn't get back to you live during the event today. So go head on over to our website, download the free trial if you're interested, and sign up for the SmartDeploy Challenge. We look forward to working with you, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.